Hello, everybody, and welcome to the California Small Farm Conference, day one. And we are about to launch into a great workshop. It is Intro to Integrating Livestock into Your Cropping System. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We've got some fantastic presenters here, farmers from around California. We're going to be sharing their experiences integrating livestock into their farms. And I'm just really appreciative of their time, as well as all our sponsors who made this event possible. I want to encourage everybody to use the chat and the Q&A feature, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen there. We really look forward to this. Thanks again for being here, and we hope everybody enjoys the rest of their conference. And with that, I will pass it along and take it away.
Thanks so much, Evan, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this whole Sunday morning. My name is Sara Tiffany. I'm the Director of Ecological Farming at CAFF. And really excited to be here with you all for this conversation about integrating livestock into cropping systems. I'm really excited about today's panel, in part because we have a few very different examples of how folks are doing this. And I think this is one of the most interesting ways land stewards are innovating and being really creative in their cropping systems. And it just seems like an area for great creativity, and hopefully we can really provide some great examples, some overviews, some recommendations for folks interested in this practice. A couple of logistical things. We highly encourage you all to ask questions. You can pop in questions to the Q&A throughout the speakers presenting and whatnot. And we will be collecting those and having a longer Q&A session towards the end of the workshop. So go ahead and pop those questions in as they come up, put them in the Q&A. For any question or any technology or kind of logistical issues you're having, please put that in the chat. Also, we are well aware that you all are wonderful resources as well to each other and to us. And so if you have things you want to share in the chat, links to resources or websites that you feel like are relevant to this conversation that you want to share with the whole group here, go ahead and pop those in the chat as well, and we'll keep track of those and share them out after the conference. So just a little bit of an idea here of how we're going to go along. We're going to have our panelists introduce themselves. We're going to go through some questions to kind of get into the meat of how their systems work and what's behind it all. And then we should have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So let's kick it off here. And we are going to start with an introduction from the Lopes family farm. Christopher and Bruce, take it away.
Hi there, I'm Christopher. I'm Bruce. We're Lopes Family Farms, and we've been farming for 4 generations now, over 113 years. My dad doing the majority of that there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been organic for 23 years, and in the last 3 years, we decided to try something new. We wanted to do the integrated duck and rice farming. We call it duck rice farming, and we raise about 100 ducklings per acre in our fields, and it allows us to use less water because they do the weeding for us, and they eat the bugs and they fertilize as they go. And normally in organic rice production, you use deep water to drown the weeds.
Yep, about 10 inches of water compared to what the ducks are doing at 4,000 square feet of space. We can grow 15 acres of rice for a month in an inch of water.
Yeah, we do transplanting like they do in Japan. So we do the
starter. That's the transplanter there.
That's the well, yeah. That was
that's the weeder.
That's the weeder. What happened there? That was a fun one. We had to try to do reverse duck rice farming there. But yeah, we do the method they do in Japan. So we bought the equipment from there, and we grow the starters like sod, transplant it in row with nice spacing for the ducks to maneuver through the fields. Oh, that was a mad, crazy storm we had. And we introduced the ducks at about a week old into the field, and they just treat the rice as a habitat. They don't they don't eat the rice plants. It has a high silica content in it. Their duck bills they know it's not going to digest well. And they just do a great job cleaning. They just clean the whole field out.
As you can see there, there's no weeds left in our field.
You can see reflections in the water of the sky there. And that was solid weeds when we first introduced the ducks. There's their duck pond. And yeah, it's been an amazing project. We chose them based off of supply availability. The Muscovies is what we picked, and it's just kind of the standard meat duck for the industry, and it's what was most available. We get it from Metzer Farms down in Gonzales, and they just same day ship it to us in little ducklings and little crates, and yeah, then we get to having fun with them. But the ducks are also a secondary crop onto themselves, so we get 2 in 1. We get a meat crop from the ducks, and we get the rice
and the fertilization, which cuts back on cost.
Yeah, way reduced costs. Doing the transplanting method means we're using 1/10 of the seed we normally would use.
Going from 300 pounds to the acre to 30.
Yeah, and we use the nursery method like my dad mentioned. So we do a 4,000 square foot, 1-inch deep pool, lay the trays down in there, and that's just 1 inch deep of water versus 10 inches deep for that same month that would have been in the field. That's where the massive water savings comes from. Plus, with the ducks doing the weeding, we just raise the water as they need it as they grow. So
that's
we
the
start
key right
way
there.
low.
And the other method of organic farming, you raise the water to 10 inches, but you're also turning the how do you say that? The rice is in jeopardy after about 18 days underwater. You end up losing about 10 to 15% of your crop just to deep water. So
it kills the weeds and it takes out some of the rice too.
Yes.
So yeah, there's the ducks. You can see they're doing their job there when they first.
That's all weeds you're looking at.
That's all weeds.
The little dark stuff in there is the rice plants in between it.
Yep. And they mowed that whole field down.
In 5 weeks, it was completely gone.
To process them, we did about 9 to 10 weeks old for the ducks. We take them to a place in Stockton about 2 hours away, and they get USDA processed there. Then we take them to nice restaurants after that, or to the community. Yeah, that was all weeds in that photo. That's actually our regular organic rice, which looks amazing too. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun with the ducks, and it's definitely changed our lives and our perspective on what rice farming is. And
a whole new method, definitely 100%.
Yeah, the rice straw bales. We had a lot of requests for that. It's kind of a tricky thing with the rice straw, because you want to incorporate that back into your field.
Save those for afterwards.
Yeah. Are we answering questions right now, or are we?
No, we're still talking about what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just yeah, giving us a general sense. The pictures are amazing, but
That's me on the transplanter right there. That's the rice transplanter.
That was our last pass of the season.
Yep. So what that does, it's got a 10-inch space. There it is, and you got little wheels there on that. Just kind of two forks, and then it kind of rotates around and takes about 1 or 2 plants and puts it in the ground every 10 inches and about 10 inches apart in a row. And yeah, that thing is amazing. So on the back of that, in the first photos you saw, you could put a 6-row weeding attachment. So if the ducks don't get to a part of the field in time, you just take the weeder and it just mulches the weeds in row in between where you just transplanted, and it does a fantastic job. And we kind of believe it might be the key to mass adoption of this method. If farmers don't want to go so far as growing the ducks, if you switch over to this
Weeding system
within row, the rice just grows into itself. It just creates a healthier plant because it has more room to bush out, basically, and you get a better stand.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And that's the rice nursery right there. That was a fun project. We use drip system and a pool, and then you have to
rototill
the field. So it's kind of like the opposite of no-till right now, but we're working on a way of doing drill seeding so we can avoid the rototilling. That's an experiment that we're going to do this year
with UC Dave,
Chico State.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, that was our irrigation project. That was a lot of fun too. But yeah, we learned about the method and from a farmer in Japan, Tako Furuno, and he started in the 80s. He noticed the ducks fields had just less weeds and better rice, so he put an electric fence up around it and
Kept all the feral animals out.
yeah, and the ducks in, and they just treat the rice as a habitat. And he wrote a PhD dissertation called "The One Duck Revolution." The universities approached him and said, we should really publish this method." Yeah, yes, they do. And I found that I'm an X-ray tech and a CT tech by trade, to kind of pay for the farming part of my life. And I found out about the duck method about 2015 and became obsessed with it. And we finally got to implement it in 2020 during that bad drought. And we're just kind of going for broke actually at that point. And we figured, let's just go in on this method and try and save the farm, and also do a lot of good for, this incredible farming method.
It works.
It works beautifully. And the mind shift, the perspective shift you have when you start going to these integrated cropping systems. We take our rice to market now. We used to go off into the ether and the commodities, and now we're selling it to schools, or selling to the community. And it's just a whole mindset shift on what farming is, when you go from the big scale down to, the individual, personal. Yeah. And it's where we need to head, I think, as an industry, just to.
That picture right there tells it all. That was solid weeds. You couldn't even see water in there.
Yeah. So we've had just a lot of community support. It's changed our lives, this cropping system. And here we are talking to all you lovely people and educating the California about this now. And it's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, gorgeous pictures, and so interesting to hear about this type of integration, and I'm excited to talk more later about how you came to it. Seems like a bit of a adaptation, try something new strategy.
Yes.
Well, let's continue our introductions. I'd love to hop over now to Kendra from LangeTwins Family Farms. And Kendra, why don't you give us a little bit of a kind of introduction and background to what you guys have been doing?
You got it. Hi, everyone. I'm Kendra Altnow. I'm with LangeTwins Family Winery and Vineyards. We are located in Lodi, California, which, if you're not familiar, is just south of Sacramento. We have been farming here in the Lodi region for 5 generations, much like the Lopes family. So
right on.
We originally were farming watermelons, and then literally the crop went south, meaning the watermelons in the South Valley ripened before the North Valley, and our market got saturated. During that time, we purchased a piece of property that happened to have grapes on it. We planted the watermelons in between the rows of the grapes because we didn't know how to farm grapes. And eventually grapes became a little bit more, what would you say, productive in our area than the watermelons. So we became wine grape growers. And that's kind of the history of how we got into wine grapes. So it was definitely not a very strategic move, but it was something that has kept our family in farming, I would say about since the 4th generation. So today we grow about 26 to 28 different varietals in the Lodi and Clarksburg appellation. So everywhere from the Delta to the Clements foothills. So we have different land types and soil types, along with the different varietals. And we farm and manage for other absentee farmers about 7,500 acres. So lots of grapes, going to lots of different wineries. But primarily we focus here in the Lodi appellation on our grazing. So we'll get into that a little bit later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kendra.
You're welcome.
Yeah, interesting that you guys started like with watermelons being the focus.
Yeah, we do still have some of the seeds, but it's it's kind of a pastime at this point.
Ah, interesting. Very cool. All right. Well, Clayton, do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. My name is Clayton Handy. I farm up here in Corning, California. I'm not going to say I'm first generation farmer because we all come from farmers eventually, right? But it's been a few generations since my family's been in farming. So I took everything, all my life savings, and put it down on 30 acres up here. And I grow the red walnut, and my day job used to be working for large corporate farms. And then I kind of did a 180 and I bought these 30 acres, and I've been organic from the beginning, made a lot of mistakes, always wanted to integrate livestock or some sort of animal. And in 2022, having never owned probably anything bigger than a rabbit or a dog, I bought 21 cows and just jumped in with both feet. And I do adaptive grazing. I move them every day. It takes a lot of my time, but I just knew my soil needed it. I needed to go next level. So that's I dabbled a little bit with bringing people in and grazing sheep on my orchard before buying the cows. I enjoyed the sheep. The cows that I bought are low line. They're miniature low line Angus or Aberdeens. So they're a little bit lower, so they don't eat too much of my trees. I started when I worked at I was an agronomist at California Olive Ranch, and when I was there, we also brought in sheep and grazed the super high density olives. So I was trying to transition a lot of their practices to regenerative ag practices. And so I had a little bit of experience with sheep, and then I bought cows. But anyways, that's basically what I do. I have another 30 acres of just pasture that I've recently purchased, and still have my day job of consulting, organic consulting and regenerative consulting to pay for my hobby farm. So that's where I'm at today.
Yeah, a hobby with a capital H. I'm not sure that's quite the name for it, Clayton, but that's fair. That's fair. We all have to make it work somehow, right? Well, great. Thank you. Thank you all of you for the introductions. And we touched on this a little bit, but would love to kind of hear a little bit more from each of you about really why you integrate livestock, right? You know, the work that we've done over the years with some folks that are trying this practice, we have learned quite clearly that it certainly is not a simple thing to do in terms of it doesn't necessarily make people's lives simpler. I think I heard from one vineyard up in Napa area that turns out that you know, sheep don't take the weekend off, and so someone has all the time, and neither do cattle and neither do ducks, right? So
No.
you know, given that it's not a super common practice and that you're bringing in complexity, why do you go about integrating livestock on your farm, and kind of what is your goal? And why don't we start with the Lopes?
All right. The goal initially, I mean, truly was we wanted to figure out a way to take our rice to market. And I found this, you know, we're an old farm, but we're a struggling farm like most farms. And we were just trying to figure out how to do more with less land and with what we have. And when I found the duck rice method, it just made sense. You know, you get to double the use of your land with less resources. And at that point, the whole mindset shift happened. And when you're struggling like we were, we didn't have all the money to go buy the equipment and everything we needed. So we just had to go out to the community and of farmers and ask for help. And we found the help we needed, and it was just great. So we just kept going, and we realized that we can build a community out of this farming system that seems to be lacking in the world today is sense of community.
Yes.
So
Most
now
definitely.
we're trying to be, we've been organic for 23 years, but we felt that regenerative was the next step and need to be better stewards of the land, but also bring the community into the farming realm and let them educate them and let them know what's possible and that there's better and different ways to do things. And eventually it'll be, once we're down the road long enough, it'll be a more resilient food system altogether. We'll need to have that in place.
And he's the one who's putting it in place. I'm just along for the ride.
Oh no, he's the mastermind behind all the work and everything. I just kind of had the vision, but he has the skill.
That's really interesting. And, in part, it's like we're talking about integrating livestock into cropping systems, but in all cases, right, it's taking this whole systems perspective on farming. And it sounds like for you guys, it's also including like the community and the food system, right? Which I think we can all relate to here. That's awesome. Kendra, can you share a little bit more about your origins and in bringing in sheep to the farm?
Sure. So part of what we do is we work with an outside PCA, so pesticide, not pesticide, but a pest control advisor. And he actually lives close to us and had sheep grazing on alfalfa field next to him. And he just said, hey, to the herder, why don't you bring them over? I have a ton of forage in my vineyard around his house, and went from there. So it was just a feed situation where they were running out of alfalfa and they needed something more. And the timing worked out before they moved them out to the Delta to graze the levees. And so the following year, in the winter of 21-22, instead of using herbicides to control our winter weeds, he suggested us to reach out to this contract grazer and do a trial on one of our vineyards here locally in Lodi. And honestly, we had no expectations. So we're like, sure, why not? There was nothing to lose, right? So we brought them in, and that was kind of the start of the trial, so to speak. And they did a great job. And so we fully have adopted it to not all of our vineyards. Like Clayton mentioned, the height of some of our trellising or height of trees, for example, we can't have them in all vineyards. But with our high wire trellising is where we focus predominantly. Yeah. So that's kind of how we got our start. But the real reason why was we wanted to promote the biodiversity in the soil and really see if that could help the soil health. We know that animals are a big component of the soil microbiome, and we weren't getting that anywhere else the way we were farming. So why not give it a shot and see in the long term if it's going to give us help on that side of the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'll say my introduction in this practice as well has also been through the soil health lens. And there's some interesting, well, you guys are part of one. There's some interesting research happening right now. And it's hard to capture, right? It really is. You bring in that ecological complexity, and it's hard to kind of nail down through those research questions, but there is data coming out, and we've collected data that suggests this as well, that you really see kind of the synergistic effect when you bring in animals plus a cover crop, for example, rather than just a cover crop by itself or just compost by itself. And yeah, just really, I think, interesting. We're going to learn a lot more in the coming years about these benefits, but from a data standpoint. But I think right now it's safe to say that we have overwhelming anecdotal evidence that it's a very positive practice, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, Clayton, what kind of motivated you to start, and kind of what was your goal? I mean, it sounded like quite a change to bring in cattle into your operation. Yeah, what was the kind of jump start there?
Yeah, kind of similar what Kendra was speaking about. I really wanted to take my soil health to the next level. Everything that I'd learned from, Alan Williams at the Savory Institute, Alan Savory and Gabe Brown, all those guys, it just seemed like that's the next level. You can only get so far with um, compost and cover crops and compost tea, and so I that was my primary reason. The secondary reason was hope that I could stack enterprises and also make some financial gains with having not only the organic red Livermore walnuts, but also meat. So that was my second goal. Although it's been hard, they've kind of become family, and it's been a hard thing to be like, okay, well, you know, but point being, I have seen a difference in soil health. I take pretty meticulous, you know, tests when it comes to just infiltration rates, soil respiration, total digestible, and then just organic matter and all that. And over the years, we've been doing this for about 6 years and grazing and cover crop, and organic matter started at 1.7, and this last fall we reached a 5. So very happy with that, and I think cows were an integral part of that, and watching the cows take all this good greenness and turn it into manure, and then let the land rest for 6 months and then come back on it. It is so fun to see, and you can see just the amount of birds. I used to manage 2,000 acres of walnuts at a corporate farm, and when you're in the middle of a walnut orchard, I rarely heard birds. Like, I rarely saw frogs. I saw one Pacific tree frog, and when I am in my orchard, it's a constant cacophony of birds. It's just amazing. And I consistently find frogs, the Pacific tree frog, and also the western toad, and 5 different species of snakes, and it's so diverse, and I love it. So it's been very, very fun.
That's great. Yeah, seeing that biodiversity come back in. I was speaking to an apple orchard farmer the other day, and they've had kind of a similar experience of more and more kind of critters showing up over time as they've moved in this regenerative direction. And she's even come to recognize the gopher snakes in the different fields, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. So some of you touched on this already, about kind of how you got started, but I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, because I think from an introductory standpoint, right, this is, I think, an interesting practice to a lot of people, but clearly you have to kind of take a little bit of a leap, right? Whether it's reaching out to your neighbor contract grazer and taking a risk there, or, buying animals. I'm curious if you could each talk a little bit about, kind of like how you heard about it, or what inspired you, if you will, and what, if anything, made you hesitant to try it out. Like, was there some kind of an assessment of like, these are the pros we think will happen, and these are the cons, here's the risk? How'd you kind of navigate that decision to actually take a step to do it? And why don't we go in like, mix it up a little bit and start with Kendra.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned earlier that we had absolutely no hesitation, but no expectations either. So we work with a contract grazer originally, and it was not a perfect year. Their goals were different than our goals. And so that was really tough for us. We did have some vineyards that ended up not making the second pass or the third pass like we anticipated. And so we ended up with some pretty weedy fields, so to speak. So we approached it differently this year. We have an old family friend that runs sheep, and he was starting to get into livestock and permanent crop grazing. And we have a year-round contract with him now. And so the relationship is really tight, and we communicate. He's just an extension of LangeTwins, and we're an extension of Valley Grazing at this point. And so we work hand in hand. The nice part is he and his partner are the ones that are watching him on the weekends, and I don't have that responsibility. But also he gives us all the expertise in animal husbandry that we don't have as wine grape farmers. So for us, it's that, I mean, having that relationship has been huge. And that really is the only way we could do it at this point, with, you know, how we want to integrate it into a larger scale farm. Because the goal for us is to figure out how to do this, not just on our high wire trellising systems, but across the whole ranch, which includes our riparian areas and our fallow fields. So did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. And really interesting to point out, right? Because I think of the 3 farms here, you guys are the only ones doing contract grazing, and that actually represents quite a lot of people that are integrating sheep, for example,
Right.
into vineyards or into orchards. And yeah, just to follow up a little bit, yeah, it sounds like that the relationship with the
100%.
and being on the same page. Could you just talk a little bit about what that looks like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so Valley Grazing, his name is Ross. He's really great. He understands the goals of what we're trying to do. So for us, in a given year, it's 4 passes within a single vineyard. So we do a post-harvest pass. That's when really they start, which we would say is the start of our year. And then a cover crop and weed management in the winter, spring, and then suckering and shoot hedging and leaf removal, and then 1 summer pass for weeds. So he knows exactly what our goals are. Obviously, what we're learning is that it's really dependent on growth, right, of what's going on with our cover crop systems within our vineyards. So if we have a really wet year like last year, and to some extent this year, the growth on the cover crop and the head of the flock is really key. So when he sees that we're falling behind, or we feel like we're falling behind, we make decisions. So right now, the decision is to grow the flock, because we can always move them somewhere else, and there isn't a worry that we're going to run out of feed for the sheep. But what was different with working with Ross versus what was working with the contract grazer we had before is that we weren't his priority. And so that was tough, because if a different contract came up that was better paying, he didn't show up to our field and or our vineyard. And we completely understand, but when you're relying on that as a cultural practice or replacing a practice that we were doing, it made it tough. So for us, the realization of having an extension of our team, someone like Valley Grazing was perfect for us, where it's a year-round extension. The only other way we would probably do it is do what Clayton and Chris, our Lopes family, have done, and do it on our own, because you can control it.
Thanks, Kendra. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I've heard from other folks that, oftentimes developing a relationship with a contractor on an annual basis is for a lot of people an entry point. Not everyone will jump in and buy their cattle or ducks or sheep, right? So I think those are important kind of experiences to share. And there's quite a few just incredible contract grazers out there. And yeah, we might be able to follow up with some resources to connect people with.
Yeah, let me be I'm not saying that all contract grazers are like what we experienced the first go around. I don't want to give them a bad name, but like the one that we were working with, it was just tough for us, because we weren't priority, but we wanted to make it our priority because we could see the benefits of having the sheep integrated, and we wanted to continue with that. We didn't want to go back to, what we were doing before. So for us, it became a goal to ensure that we could continue this practice as not an option, as our, number one go-to tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Clayton, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of like how you came to, jumping into buying those cattle and getting started, and like what kind of things did you weigh ahead of time? Did you consider other animals? Yeah.
Yeah, I stewed on that for a very long time. I was thinking of kuni pigs. I was actually also looking at maybe ducks or geese. One even wild hair idea was guinea pigs, but that was just more of after watching a crazy video. But I contracted the sheep for a couple years, and I don't know, they were good, but I felt like I wanted something that I thought was just a little bit easier to manage. And I talked to some different people, and they were like, well, cows are pretty easy. They usually kind of, if they get out, they usually kind of just stick together. And I thought, well, I'll try the cows. And I didn't want to get a standard size because I was like, well, what if they eat the trees? And sure enough, they do. And thank goodness I have the miniature cows, because they love walnut leaves. I would have never thought. And so I don't know that I made the right decision with the low line, but I bought 21 cows, so I had to go with it. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Would I do the same animal? I don't know. I've really learned, like, I used to only farm trees, and now I have a bunch of personalities out there, and there's just something about that. I love it. I look forward to moving the cows every day, and they're really happy to see me, and they all have their own personality, and we understand each other. And I have a few rebellious ones, and we're working on that. And it's a lot of fun. So I don't regret it, but I tell you, it has been so much work. It is so much work. Like, I don't really go anywhere anymore, because I can open up maybe a week's worth of feed, weeks, instead of, because I move them every day. But it's just hard. It's hard, but it's also very rewarding. And
Yeah.
I have 40 cows now. They breed, almost like rabbits, but not quite. but yeah, it was challenge, and I just jumped in. I don't know. I think if you're gonna do it, you just jump in, right? That's what I do with a lot of things. And then you figure it out. I had a dear friend, Brianna Owens, and I don't know if anybody knows her, but she runs cattle, and I've spent many hours talking with her because I just didn't understand these creatures at the beginning, and still don't all the way. And she's been a great help for me. So it was good to have that. And of course, my foundation, like I said, Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, Alan Savory, the first book that ever changed my perspective. The reason why I got into this was One Straw Revolution. So I can't wait to read the One Duck Revolution, because Masanobu Fukuoka that was the one man that changed my paradigm. And so if anybody hasn't read at least the One Straw Revolution, highly recommend it. Now I'm going to read the One Duck Revolution. I didn't know about that. So thank you. So yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Clayton. Yeah. That is a great book. And I am also excited to read the One Duck Revolution. And yeah, Christopher and Bruce, why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you came about really deciding to jump in and essentially become duck farmers. What was that process like in terms of, really kind of going for it, so to speak?
Last ditch effort to save a farm.
Yeah, it was
It's like a 2% rule. Everything you put out, and acre wise, and for rice, 200 acres is a very small farm. And when you put that into perspective to a 2% of what you're putting out, you get 40,000 back. You split it 4 ways. Everybody gets $10,000 at the end of a $250,000 project. And the big corporation takes away $2 or $3 million of our rice and makes a fortune off of it. And that's just the way rice farming was. Everybody fell on co-ops because nobody could afford a mill. A mill back in the day was $1 million or more. And so we formed a co-op in Princeton between the 20 farmers that we had, and they all put money together, and we have a place to store our rice.
That was about 70 years ago, 60 years ago.
Easily 80 years ago. So that was in the 60s,
60s.
50s and the 60s when that was happening.
So,
And that's just the mindset of all farmers. As we were getting 16 cents a pound on our rice, and they were making $2 a pound off of it. So it was very frustrating to start with. And when he came up with the duck rice method, I read the PhD and said, this is a no-brainer. I mean, most farmers have a weed problem that you can't even see rice in the field. It's literally 70% weeds and 30% rice. So it was very hard to go into organic to start with, just knowing that the odds are against you. I was fortunate enough to have a neighbor who gave me a secret, because back in the old days, they used deep water as a method to get rid of their weeds. And he said 18 days underwater, and you lower that water 2 inches and just let the rice come up, and everything underneath it is all weeds. And they're already in a position to where they just want to fall down and die. And so when you lower the water, they just fall with it. And if you leave your water on too long, your rice falls with it too, and it dies. So you have to it's called gray hair and no hair. Watching this for the last 21 years, but it's been a method that's worked every year. I've actually 21 years clean with no weeds.
Yeah, that's been incredible. And but the issues still persist, that the input costs keep going up, and the price, if the market gets flooded with cheap organic rice from like Argentina or somewhere, then there's no way to really move that locally. And then our contractor, they just don't have storage. There's literally no capacity for all the farmers to grow organic. So
then they cut back all of our
organic
crops.
Contracts. Yeah, we were trying to go full 200 acres organic about 6-7 years ago, and when we're ready to do it, the whole market got flooded. There's no room for any of our rice. And so we just decided that we want to take our destiny into our own hands, and we had to act. And so the duck rice method was just a way to, rice is
you just don't go into organic rice. There's a 3-year period where you have to take and turn your land organic.
Oh yeah.
So the drought is what saved us, actually.
Kind of, yeah. So it would give us that time to try to experiment and throw that Hail Mary pass. And but yeah, it's worked out, because now with the ducks, we're able to use that less water. You're not drowning your rice too. You're keeping it low, so you get these really strong, healthy plants. But yeah, the ducks themselves, we're only doing 8 acres of duck rice right now. To do the whole 200 acres would be about 20,000 ducks, which is
not ready for that.
Not ready for that, but we got to start somewhere. But yeah,
we don't have the funds for that either.
No.
I mean, we're talking about duck shacks and feed.
But yeah, no, it was just become a no-brainer when you're kind of staring. You have the existential crisis in front of you, and the benefits were just so incredible if we could pull it off. The only issue is Japan's average farm size is like 1 to 5 acres, and trying to adapt this method for one field that's 20 acres or something. You gotta hope that your equipment translates to that, and all the methods and everything. But no, that's kind of was our impetus for doing it.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm, hearing you guys all talk about this, I'm curious to ask, so you've kind of gotten started and I'm sure had to set some things up in the beginning, but as you've gone along, what kind of design elements have you had to consider in the farm, right? Like in the cropping system, whatever it may be, in order to really make the integration of the animals work and even try to optimize it, right? And because I'm sure there's been some of that for all of you. And yeah, I don't know, maybe let's start with Clayton this time, maybe.
Yeah. So I have a lot of opinions on this, and I don't know if I should share all of them because some of them go maybe against what we're trying to do. But I think the hardest part, as far as design goes in orchards, is the risers, the sprinklers. You've got to. I have an organic orchard here, and everybody's pushing the micro sprinklers, and so that's what I have. I started with a riser at 18 inches. I made adjustments to 2 feet and made the third adjustment to 3 feet. So my risers in the orchard are 3 feet tall. That's because the cover crop and just my pasture, the succession is happening. I have perennial grasses now, bunch grasses, and they just get really tall, and the sprinklers can't irrigate, and so I've had to raise the risers, so to speak, right? So that design, I always say, when you're trying to integrate animals and you're also doing a regenerative system, the playbook's not been written. Like, we're pioneers here, and I could write a book about all the failures. And so if anybody wants to reach out to me, and I can tell you what not to do. I'm still trying to figure out what works best, right? So then I have these tall 3-foot sprinklers, and cows are inquisitive animals, and they just love to rub up against them and then bite the sprinklers off for no reason other than just to, like I said, I've got a few rebellious ones that they'll look at me and then they'll bite the sprinkler off. And I'm just like, you did that on purpose, So then I had to get creative. And again, nobody's done this. I'm trying to figure it out. And so I tried a variety of different things. And what I ended up doing, believe it or not, is I bought bird spikes, the little pigeon spikes that you see on buildings. I bought bird spikes and I wrapped them around in 2 different places, one right below my sprinkler head so then on the design I had on my risers, I had to put an outside sleeve that's 3-inch, and then an inside sleeve that's 2-inch that I could pull off of anyway. So design, yeah, talk to me about design. But then on the 2 different sleeves that I've got a row of bird spikes, and they're not really sharp, but they're sharp enough and flimsy enough that it's not a real reliable place to scratch, and it's not as appealing to bite the sprinkler off. It's not foolproof yet. And I used to just do the poly wire down the drive rows, but you have to move I could only get 3 days out of that. And so then I was moving 2,000 feet of poly wire every 3 days, and it was taking 3 hours of my time every 3 hours, and it just wasn't going to work. Like, I still had a day job. Like, I needed to figure this out. And so then I raised the canopy of the orchard, raised the risers, and put bird spikes on everything. And it seems to work much better. Again, not foolproof, but yeah. So if honestly, like, I consult for a few farms that are getting into regenerative ag, and they're still on flood irrigation. And I know a lot of it, there's a lot of organizations out there that aren't keen on flood irrigation, but I would say, like, if you are practicing regenerative ag and your infiltration rates are amazing, and you're irrigating at night, like, I would say that most of that water is going to go right back into the ground after what's being used by the tree. And if you're pushing deeper roots just because your infiltration rates are so good, then I would say, like, if I were to do it again, I'd go back to the old way and do flood irrigation, because then I could move the cows with the flood irrigation. I wouldn't have any sprinklers to worry about. I could have, and then plant the pasture from the beginning, and then just really work on infiltration rates, and just, I think it would be the way to go. I mean, and again, that's why I didn't want to disclose too much, because that might be controversial, but I would love to see some studies in that, as you know, if you did flood irrigate, like the good old days, you know, these walnut orchards would get irrigated once a month. Why didn't, like, so we kind of lost that ability to make these trees a little more self-reliant and put down sinker roots. Most of the roots are just hanging out at the top, which is naturally that's what a tree does anyway. But there's always about, you know, up to 15% roots that, as far as mass goes, that will they'll be sinkers, and those sinker roots are for deep, you know, deep water. So anyway, that was the biggest design challenge. And then obviously the walnut tree, I'm raising the canopy, perfect for because I catch frame harvest, because when you have trunk to trunk, you know, pasture and you're grazing, like I mean, yeah, I mean, it just makes most sense to do a catch frame. So I use prune harvesters. I think I'll probably have to keep my trees generally smaller, because I think that would be just the best way to do it. And I might lose some nuts every year, but I direct sell all my walnuts. And so I kind of I'm not a slave to the market, so to speak. I actually do enjoy a better margin, because I direct sell. I've got I don't have great yields, you know, yet. The trees are still young, but it's definitely been a blessing to be able to direct sell, have a customer base that buys my walnuts in the United States. And I'm trying to work on more local, you know, venues for that. But anyway, I probably went into too much detail, but there you go.
That was great.
And I think it just really emphasizes, right, that there's a lot to figure out. Like when you said that you just made the decision, and then you have to figure out, like, trying out these different modalities of irrigation and other ways, like, yeah, trying to figure out how the system should operate. Regarding irrigation is a hot topic. I'm sure people will weigh in, and we all know it depends on where you are in California, what your size is, all that good stuff. All right, yeah, great examples though. Why don't we hear a little bit about the design elements? I know you've been referencing a little bit of your trellising systems, Kendra, and I know in particular with sheep, that's definitely a big issue. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of the adaptations and innovations you guys have had to kind of go into to make this work?
We actually lucked out a little bit, because we started a high wire cordon or trellis system for mechanical pruning purposes, so for mechanization, and it's on average about 65 inches off the ground, and that height just happens to be a perfect height to also use the sheep as in the vineyards. So our lower cordon is not an option, just because they're fine to be in there in post-harvest, and they're fine to be there when the vine is dormant. But the second we have bud break and anything growing, the shoots are growing, we can't have them in there, because obviously they'll take our crop away from us. But the only other thing, and Clayton mentioned it with the irrigation, is irrigation. So the sheep do use the drip system, the wire, to get higher into the canopy, and, you know, kind of find that nice green leaves at certain times of the year. And that does cause some breakage on our tees, but it's not enough to deter us from not doing it. It's just a matter of knowing that we have a little bit more repair work to do post grazing in a vineyard. They like to climb. In terms of going from row to row, they either jump over or go under, depending on their size. So we aren't really concerned at this point with having to move our drip up any higher, so they can just go under it because we find that they're going to jump over it anyway. So I mean, honestly, we know where they can go and where they can't go based on what we already have. So, but high wire for us makes sense, and it's showing to be better for the grapes too.
That's great. Yeah, there's been, I mean, hearing there's been some interesting developments in vineyard designs, and it'll be interesting to see how those are adopted as new vineyards are planted over time.
Yeah, it's really varietal specific as well. So, I mean, trellising, a lot goes into vineyard design, but from a trellis height, it's also variety dependent. So if we know it's going to go into a regen project, then we have to be smart in knowing that we're also going to have that higher wire. So some do better with high wire than others. So it's just a matter of what the market is telling us from who's drinking what out there, and predicting that from 7 years from now to see what we're going to be planting.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Christopher, and Bruce wants to hop back in if he's around. Yeah, I know there's a lot, so don't feel like you need to explain every element of it, but could you give us some examples of kind of the main design aspects that you've really had to figure out?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the average field size is like 20 acres or so for rice. So we took one of our 17-acre fields and we turned it into 5 3-acre fields with a 1-acre duck pond on one end, which we would fill. And then we had an old semi trailer that was converted into an office that we had purchased, and we tore the floor out of that, put in like a nice wire mesh down one half of it, and another half had the brooding room, had all these outlets and stuff. So we just raised the ducks in there. We parked that trailer in the field and then built the duck ponds around it, and then kind of created an entrance in there. And yeah, so then we had these 2 ditch systems. This is all my dad's design. Like I said, he's the mastermind behind all the stuff there. And
Actually, we're driving by a field one day on the way to the Rice Research Station, and
yeah, we saw that
there's a perfect design field for what we were gonna do.
Yeah, and we're just like, all right, let's just
remodel it.
Yeah, recreate that. We built a 1-acre duck pond in there, and that kind of feeds the ditch system, which then feeds the 5 fields, and then we have a drainage ditch on the other side, on the far west side, and then you can even recirculate that water out of the ditch back in with another electric pump if we wanted to. But yeah, the challenge was we had never designed a system like that before, and it was during the year of the drought, so there's no water on the west side of the river. There's no water allocations for anything, so we had to drill a well.
We took our insurance money and drilled a well with it.
Yep, and that was fun too because we'd never done that before, and the well was on the other side of the property, and 600
feet from where we needed it.
Yeah, so we had to get some lay flat pipe from the well across the bridge into our 1-acre 8-acre field, and then that would push the water across another pipe into the duck pond,
which failed.
And that all failed because the drought had just dried up the land so much that the ground was just sucking up all the water. So by the time we were going to try and flood that first field across the bridge, it took like 8 days, and it never really happened. And we couldn't
even get water to our duck field.
Nope. all that work that we did preparing the whole design, everything, we just abandoned it and
pulled out the rototiller and rototilled up an entire 8-acre crop.
Yep. We just were like, well, we got to have the room and the spacing for the ducks, so we got to get rid of all this rice we had just planted.
Well, the reason behind getting rid of the rice that we just planted was that it took 8 days for that water to go 2 to 3 inches deep. So now we have the biggest weed problem you've ever seen was going to happen.
Yeah.
Even the ducks, I don't think, stood a chance against it. So we rototilled all the weeds in.
And the rice, and then we transplanted that field
with all of our transplants that we had left over that we weren't gonna be able to use.
Yep. So then so it was just a big challenge. You had to basically complete redesign of our field system and irrigation system. And when you're trying to do massive projects like that, it's just we like to call it failing forward, you know, everybody's talking about the challenges and like all the mistakes and everything. And it's like, that's
Part of it.
when you're pioneers, when you're trying to do new things, you know, that's the part of the process. But the most important thing is that you just fail forward every time, you know, just keep a little bit, just head in the right direction. Don't give up.
It literally was one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. Then all of a sudden it became 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah. And we just
And
kind
it
of,
just kept on progressing along. And all of a sudden we're like 5 steps forward and 1 step back.
yeah. So
The back's always there.
yeah. But yeah, the challenge was, you know, just trying everything new. And then of course the duck shack is now no longer near the field that we were going to raise them in and everything and have them work. So we had to teach them how to go about 100 yards down the road and across another
Ditch and into another ditch and
into
over
the-
field.
into the field. So we got this march of ducks every morning out, but the ducks are actually really intelligent.
Smart.
Really intelligent. We just kind of dragged their food tray along and they followed it, and then by about the 3rd day, they knew right where to go.
Day 5.
Day 5.
That was
okay.
very heartwarming for me to where they didn't no longer need me.
Yeah.
I opened up the big doors to the thing, and all of a sudden, all the ducks ran past me,
Yeah.
and they ran to the field to go eat. It was
Yep.
beautiful.
And then they know where to go at night. They just bring themselves back in at night. So if we don't get the food down in time, they've already put themselves away in the duck shack, and then you got to try and fight through them to get their food down. And but yeah, that's the challenges of the we had to basically redo
redesign everything.
everything.
Take rice farming 101, throw it out the window, and start all new.
There's basically no nothing that
Nothing cross forward.
Nope.
It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's pretty great though.
The challenges and it was
like
a challenge all the way through, and it's something that I've been missing for about
Mhm.
several years. And once you become complacent in farming, I can do it in my sleep.
Mhm.
You know, now I have to wake up to it
And think about it all day long. Yeah. But it's great, you know, and it changes your perspective on farming, and also the skill building that comes with it, you know. And we talk about the resilient food system. You know, if you have this more specialty equipment to alter your land and adapt, you know, when things hit the fan, your mindset's already ready for adaptation because you've been in it for so long trying to just make that one thing work. So yeah,
literally changing our minds on the fly as we're doing it and saying, no, let's do this. And
probably
let's do
probably
that.
5 times a day there would be an existential crisis, and we just had to work our way through it, you know. I'm sure everybody else can relate to that too. You got hard deadlines with nature.
That was great, you guys, and I think I really love that phrase, failing forward. And I think, you know, if you're not creative, you're not trying out things, and you're not failing, you're not taking steps, you know. And
Mhm.
one thing it definitely sounds like, it's, you know, there's just never a dull moment, right? So
No, not at all.
that, you know, coming from more conventional backgrounds and starting to take steps towards regenerative, sort of being like, oh, I'm not bored anymore. I have so much to think about. It's such
Oh my God.
it's always changing.
Plus, this just opens up possibilities, you know, because you're building that community. You when you're more involved with your land, you realize how much more you can do with it. And then when you go out to the community, people are just like, oh, we like your rice straw, we like the rice hulls, you know, because people want to make biochar out of the rice hulls, and it's this whole value added down the line. And that's something we never even considered before, but people just come out of the woodwork, and it just keeps growing and growing. And then, you know, you think that, okay, well, we do if you're doing direct to consumer sales, you get, you know, more profits, which means more profit per acre. So maybe you can now take a little bit of acreage and try something new, or bring another person in that wants to farm, has a great idea, and then, you know, start like a little incubator type setup too with that, you know, that's the idea we're kind of heading for.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I'm gonna, this is a great conversation, and I want to make sure we bring in some questions from our audience here. And some of them have been answered. So I'm going to kind of go through here and maybe ask, you know, a couple of you more targeted questions. I think for Kendra and Clayton, can you guys speak a little bit to the cover composition that you decide on in order to have, good benefit for the livestock forage? And has that changed in any way? Or are you actually just having, resident vegetation and trying to manage that with grazing?
Mainly,
I want to talk about us or
I think I was thinking of Kendra and Clayton because
okay. Yeah.
it's possible that are you guys like planting cover crop seed in the fall, for example?
not yet. We need to get into that.
What is, yeah.
Clayton, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay, Kendra. I started, yes, I use green cover seed. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the website, but they have a calculator on their website, and you can put your priority, like let's say you want to build organic matter, or you want forage for or cattle forage, or even bee forage. So you can put in the priority, and then they'll generate species for you that would be the priority for whatever your priority is, the best species that work. So I use their calculator a lot, and I still use it to this day for the consulting that I do. It's a very, very good tool. Again, green cover seed, I believe they're out in Nebraska. I have purchased seed from them before. I do try to be a little more local lately, so I use Lockwood seed, and they're pretty good about putting if I have a big customer, I can put an order in advance, and they'll mix for me, usually a larger scale. And if not, then I'll just take two different mixes, and I'll mix them together. And I'll try to find as many of the species that I found as the priority with green cover seed. So yeah, that's who I use. Interestingly enough, I planted cover crop, and I still plant cover crop, but yeah, I mentioned succession, and that's a real thing in a perennial system. And I've got trees, and I don't disturb the ground. I don't till. I only run around on a four-wheeler to check the sprinklers. The only heavy equipment that gets on my ground is just harvest. That's it. So and I think with that and the minimal disturbance, I just have a lot of perennial grasses coming in, and they're bunch grasses. They're big and they're perennial, and I'm just gonna take nature. There's a lot of different clovers that come. There's a few little thistles here and there. Nothing that's I'm worried about, but there's naturally the diversity that happens in a pasture is definitely manifesting right now. And although so what my cover crop now is more of pasture cropping. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but it's picking varieties of cover crops that actually can germinate in an existing pasture. And there are certain species that you can use, and sorghum sudan is one of them. So I'll pasture crop in the summer sometimes. I still will go in and try to no-till drill seed. That's the other equipment I do use is the no-till drill seeder. So, but more and more I just use less and less cover crop because the natural diversity is just it's got a life of its own now, and I'm just going to embrace it.
Thank you.
So dreamy. I love it. So we plant cover crop every fall post-harvest. And the choice of the cover is based on what the soil needs or what the vineyard needs. So livestock or the sheep aren't necessarily the primary focus. It's not necessarily like for them. But the sheep that we have are the doper sheep that are running, and they're pretty hardy. And so from that stance, they're not particularly picky in what they eat. Yes, they are picky. Like they do prefer the grasses over some of the weeds. And when we see that happening in the vineyard, we make the paddocks smaller, and guess what they'll eat? The stuff that they don't really like. So, but yeah, the choice of cover is really dependent on what the soils in the vineyard is telling us.
Awesome. Yeah, and I have a question for that maybe we'll start with the Lopes, and I think this is a great question, especially from an introductory point, is sort of like, let's talk about the logistics of having animals as part of your farm. How do you manage care 24/7? Is there supplemental feed? And to what extent do you have other crew members supporting the integration of the animals, such as like, do you ever get to leave? I think these are good questions.
Oh, definitely. Going back to cover crops though, we don't plant the cover crops actually. There is a water fern called a zola, and that will double in mass every 2 or 3 days. And we haven't had a chance to incorporate it yet, but it's part of the system. That's
Full of nitrogen.
Yeah, it's got nitrogen fixing bacteria in there, and it's like, the ducks will eat that. And also once you drain the fields, that just kind of goes right into the soil at the end of the season there. So that is kind of a cover crop in ways. It's part of the integration of the system. But in terms of the ducks and the challenges there and getting away, you're pretty much waking up at sunrise with them and taking them out every morning. And we do feed them supplementary feed. We just get organic duck feed from like Tractor Supply right now. But it'd be nice to start growing our own duck food, set aside some acreage, and reduce costs that way.
Soldier worms.
Black soldier fly larvae. That would be another one. Start raising those.
And they actually need to come in at night and eat one more time. So yes, we do supplement them in the evenings.
Mm-hmm. And that's how we train them to come back into their shelter too.
They love to have that last meal at night. They don't have to work for it. They just go in and eat and just sit down and fall asleep. It's kind of pretty neat.
Yeah, it's
very relaxing. Unless you happen to let the ducks get into the shack before you feed them, then that is another story. You want to be there before the ducks come home.
Yeah.
And it's just so neat because they take care of themselves. Literally, I trained them for the first 2 weeks out in the field because when we did that first one, like I said, the weeds got away from us. So we had some water grass that they would not touch. So I just went out there and I would lead them along, and all of a sudden I'm taking them all the way to the far side of the field, and I worked them all the way back to another section of the field. When I got back, I had found out that they'd already eaten that section, and I didn't do it. At that point, I was really relieved, and I was able to not have to go out for 4 hours, 3 hours in the morning. I'd do about an hour in the morning, and then what I'd do is toss some mealworms over here, and then all the ducks would go over here, and then I would slowly fade away into the background, and then they would just get lost because they couldn't see me in between the rice. And they would just come back in about an hour looking for me. Okay, now, and then they go sit on the banks and relax, and I'd take them back out for noon. So I'd feed them 3 times a day.
And it's kind of nice being out there with them too, because when they don't get to those bigger weeds, you can sit out there and just kind of cut the weeds down with them. You're sitting out there weeding with them,
Yeah, well, that's it does sound like a very much a full-time situation. And unfortunately, our time went very fast. So we're actually out of time, but I do want to encourage folks, everyone that's attending this webinar is going to receive a follow-up email with some resources. We'll make sure to link to all 3 of these farms. And also we have actually, CAFF has had some great field days at each of these farms. So we have blogs from those field days, which also go into a little bit of how each of these farms operates and successfully integrates. And I believe Giselle is dropping in a couple of links to our integrated crop livestock systems webpage on the CAFF website, as well as the Ecological Pest Management website, which has a bunch of these blogs on it. So check those out. Kendra, thanks for dropping your contact info in there. And thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all 4 of you for chiming in. I know there's just so much to share, but I hope that this conversation gave some great examples and kind of context and inspiration for folks that are interested. So
Thank
thanks
you
all.
so much. Thank you for having us. This has
Yeah.
been oh yeah, that's it. All right, cool. We're done.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Where was it? Where's the other guy there? The cattle guy. Is he in here somewhere? Still.
Don't know where to look.
I don't either.
$32 chats and that'd be it.